Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Innovation Propels the Movement, the State of the Savings Field. Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to share some new findings from our research and to have a great conversation with the Children's Savings Account field today. So thank you for joining us. We're going to walk through a quick welcome and a couple of housekeeping items before I get started. First is an introduction. My name is Erin Thiemann. I am a Senior Program Manager at Prosperity Now, and I will be leading our conversation today. We're so excited to share our new report with you all and with the field. And a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Many of you have used GoToWebinar before. I see lots of familiar faces on our attendees list, and I'm sure we'll have some more folks join as well. This webinar will be recorded and made available to registrants. I want to point out two things. One, we'll send out a recording and you'll have access to the PowerPoint. And two, in the handout section of GoToWebinar is a link to our new report, Innovation Propels the Movement. So a lot of the findings that we're going to be sharing today are available as well. And I want to make sure that everyone is on mute if they're able to, and to ensure our sound quality. We will be having a Q&A later in our conversation, so please feel free to start typing your questions in now or share them anytime in the questions box, which is in the control panel on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar box. And if you experience any technical issues, please let us know. We want to make sure that you're able to fully participate in today's webinar. Today, I will be joined by our colleague in the field, Celeste Rodriguez. Celeste is a senior project manager in the Community Investment for Families Department in Los Angeles, formerly the Housing and Community Investment Department. In addition to her previous roles as working on racial equity for the City of Los Angeles in the Community Investment Department, Celeste leads the city's work on two really great initiatives that we're really excited to talk to her about today. One of which is Los Angeles's Basic Income Pilot Program, and the other is Opportunity LA, the largest citywide CSA program in the country. So Celeste will be joining us in a little bit to talk about her program and some exciting innovations in the field. But until that point, you guys are stuck with me. Today's objectives are pretty simple. We're going to talk about some findings from the Children's Savings Account, or CSA, program survey data. So I will continue to use the phrase CSA throughout this presentation, and know that we're talking about children's savings accounts. And secondly, we're going to spotlight some innovation in the field with Opportunity LA and Celeste. Olivia is going to launch a quick poll just so we can get a sense of who is in the room today in our audience. So she's going to launch this poll, and we'll be asking, what type of entity do you represent? So who's in the room? You can select more than one if that applies to you, and we'll just keep this open for just about 30 seconds, and then we will move on just so we get a sense of who's in the room. All right, we can go ahead and close the poll. And so what we see is about just more than a third of you guys are practitioners. So welcome back if you've been in the CSA space. And for the 23% of you that are interested in bringing a CSA program to your community, welcome to the field, and welcome to a great group of folks that are really generous with time and resources. There's a lot of great advocates on this call today as well in research and policy, and I'm sure we'll find out in future conversations everyone that makes up that other group. So thanks for doing that, Olivia. Now that we have a sense of who is in the room, we're going to go ahead and share some exciting findings from our State of the Children's Savings Field report. So this is our new report. Olivia is going to drop a link to it in the chat. and we'll share the slides with this for this presentation as well afterwards in case you lose the link. It's available in the handout section as well. So we have a new report called Innovation Propels the Movement. This report came out the first week of May, and we're going to highlight some of the findings in our conversation today, but know that there are even more results and interesting information in the report, and it's available online, and we're really excited to share what we've learned today with you all. So before we dig into the findings, we wanted to just take a minute and talk about where we are now as a field. We've reached some major milestones over the last year that we want to lift up and celebrate. The first of which is our most exciting finding from the field, is that we have officially crossed the 1 million kid threshold by the end of 2021. There are 1.2 million kids across the country that have access to a CSA and are building savings for their future. This is a huge milestone in the field, and just demonstrates the growth of the field over the last decade. Speaking of decades, this past year was also the 10-year anniversary of the first citywide program, Kindergarten to College, in San Francisco. They put out a great press release and some videos celebrating that milestone. But this field has really grown and matured over the last decade, and we're excited to lift up their celebrations and think about where we can go from here as a field. And the other major milestone, or thinking about how far we've come in 2022, is the explosive growth of bringing CSAs to scale. And so over the last year, we have seen the expansion of NYC Kids Rise Save for College program, which is a CSA program based in New York and serves the largest school district in the country. And close behind with Los Angeles, the second largest school district in the country, the launch of Opportunity LA, which you'll get to hear more about from Celeste in a little bit. So the two biggest school districts in the country now have CSA programs, as well as continued enrollment of statewide programs in Pennsylvania, Maine, Nevada, and others. So we've continued to see large growth of CSAs, and we are not slowing down by any sense of the word. Wanted to share a little bit about our report methodology. So the findings that we're sharing today are based on our annual CSA program survey that we first conducted in 2016. We send this survey out to practitioners in the field to share information with us. We send it out in the fall of each year. So all of the data that you're going to see today is based on the end of 2021. 65 programs responded to our survey, and we include data for another set of programs that didn't get a chance to respond to the survey through a combination of public information, partners in the field like IERE and CDM in Michigan, and past surveys. So cobbling together some responses between a couple of different instruments to make sure we're trying to get the best snapshot available of the field that we can. So what did we learn from our survey and from our data? The first thing is that our field continues to grow in the total number of programs. What you see here is that there are 115 programs, and this is a timeline of when they were launched. In our report, we share that there are 123 programs, and we just don't have start dates for a handful of programs. So that's why you see 115 on this chart and 123 in our report, but more than 100 programs across the country and continued growth year over year, even during a global pandemic. As I shared earlier, previewed earlier, our most exciting finding is that 1.2 million kids in the US have a CSA. It's really exciting, as you can see, and as Shira said in the comments, we've come a long way from our first year of reporting on this data with just over 300,000 kids having a CSA. We're now at 1.2 million, and we're poised to see even more growth in the field, largely driven by the continued enrollment and expansion of large municipal programs and statewide programs. So big programs like Pennsylvania are enrolling about 100,000 kids a year, and our large school district partnered programs are continuing to enroll tens of thousands of kids in a year. So for all of those program staff who've been in the field for a long time, we're really excited to share that more than 1 million kids have a CSA. So that's very exciting. Next, I wanted to briefly show where CSA programs are in the country. So this heat map shows the number of CSA programs. So the darker the color, the more CSA programs that operate within that state. So as you can see, far and away leading the pack here is Indiana, which hosts Promise Indiana, which has, I believe, exactly 28 programs in several counties. We also see more than a dozen programs in Michigan and California, a number of programs in Texas and Missouri. So a lot of CSA activity in a lot of states. There are currently 39 states plus DC that operate a CSA program. And what we see on this next slide here is the number of participants across the US. So for programs that have a statewide program on the previous graph, they'd be in a lighter color because they only have one program, but that program is serving hundreds of thousands of kids. So what we see in this view is that we have a lot of kids enrolled across the country in a CSA program. Pennsylvania remains the largest program. They enroll about 100,000 kids a year and are the dark blue end of this heat map. We also see large statewide programs like Nevada and Maine, and just the sheer number of programs in California at more than a dozen are also leading to the different colors that you see across this graph. And what I will also say is that if you are joining us today from one of the states that is in gray, we would love to connect you to resources and connect you to this field to get you folks on the map. And we have already had conversations with organizations coming from some of these states in gray and are excited to support CSA activity here. And maybe someday we will do a cool animated slide where we can see these colors change over time, because it really is an incredible amount of growth and a credit to practitioners, policymakers, and advocates across the field that we have come this far, and 39 states plus DC have kids with savings for their future. So what are all these CSA programs aiming to do with their CSA program? In our survey, we ask about program goals, and we ask programs to rank their top 3 goals. And what we see and have seen since we started collecting this data in 2016 is that most programs' #1 goal is increasing the number of young people who complete college or career training. So 42% of programs that responded to our survey said that this is their #1 goal. And we continue to see interest in other goals related to economic mobility and financial capability. And where we have also seen growth in this space, in the program goal space, is around decreasing racial inequities in educational attainment. So this question, or this program goal, has continued to rise, especially over the past 3 years, with now about 42% of programs saying that decreasing racial inequity is one of their top 3 goals. It's far from most programs' #1 goal. As you can see, only 13% of programs are designed with that as their primary goal, but we do continue to see an increase in interest in racial inequity in the CSA space. But primarily, we are continuing to focus on that North Star of increasing the number of young people who complete college or career training. One of the next findings that we've continued to share over the past couple of years in our report is related to how participants enroll in a CSA program. So the bullets on the left-hand side are talking about the number of programs. And so what we see is that 69% of programs use opt-in enrollment. So that means either a parent or a child or young person needs to take a step to enroll in the program or sign up. and about 30% of programs use opt-out. And when we say opt-out, we are talking about automatic enrollment. So what we see is that when we look by program, more programs are using opt-in than using opt-out. But when we look at the data by the number of kids being served by each program, the data inverts, and we see that about 82%, so just over 8 in 10 kids that have a CSA have been automatically enrolled in that CSA program. There's one program that uses a hybrid enrollment model, but what we continue to see and recommend as a best practice is opt-out or automatic enrollment. And most programs that use opt-out or automatic enrollment do so in order to facilitate large-scale enrollment across a service area like a city, school district, or even a state. And we've also found, and the data continue to show, that automatic enrollment reduces barriers, particularly for low-income families, to be able to participate and take advantage of a CSA program in their area. So this trend remains consistent over time. The next thing, the next set of findings that we're sharing here is related to program contributions. Program contributions also are sometimes called incentives, but what we're talking about here is money that is going into the actual CSA, the Child Savings Account. So the data here are shown by participant. So this is looking at the number of kids who have access to each different type of program contribution. So what we see is that 93% of kids that have a CSA receive an initial deposit. So $50 remains the most common seed deposit amount, followed by $100 and then $25. So 9 in 10 kids that have a CSA account are getting some type of initial seed deposit to kickstart that investment. And in most cases, it's $50. We have some programs that are as generous as $500 or $1,000, and some programs that start as small as $5. But $50 remains the most common amount. The next type of contribution on this list here is a benchmark contribution. These are also called milestones or bonuses. So about a third of kids that are participating in a CSA can earn or be given an additional program contribution for something that's not related to deposit activity. So that could be a milestone, like a child's first birthday and receiving a $10 bonus for reaching their first birthday or graduating kindergarten. And we can also see benchmark contributions for things like parents or guardians participating in a financial coaching program. So these contributions look very different across programs, but what they have in common is that they are all rewarding or adding additional funds to these accounts for things that are not related to making a deposit of family's own money. And the next three down on this list are all related to incentivizing and rewarding families for making contributions of their own. So about 27% of kids in a CSA program have access to a savings match. So that could be a dollar for dollar match where participant makes a $1 deposit and the program matches it with $1, or it could look like a deposit bonus, which 7% of participants have access to. And a deposit bonus is something like a flat contribution or a flat bonus amount for the act of making a deposit. So regardless of how much money you deposit into your account, you may get a $5 bonus or a $10 bonus for every deposit. And lastly, here are prize-linked savings. So these are savings that are rewarding the activity of savings and offer typically a larger contribution as a raffle or a system based on chance. So anyone who makes a deposit in the month of May is entered into a raffle to win a $100 bonus or a $500 bonus. So again, thinking about the activity of savings rather than a match, which is exactly matching or putting in exactly what the family contributed. So we continue to see a lot of variety in this space of program contributions, and outside of initial deposit, this has been a space where we've seen a lot of creativity of programs, and a lot of programs make adjustments during COVID to make sure that families have opportunities to engage virtually with their program. The next thing that I'm going to share is about targeted contributions. So targeted contributions is a new feature in our report that we introduced last year, and we wanted to measure how the field is potentially offering targeted contributions or targeted benefits, and offering targeted services, contributions, or benefits, whatever you want to call it, in most of these programs are a way to work toward equity goals and understand that across a given program of enrolled participants, there are higher need and lower need participants. And so different programs have approached this in different ways, but about 42% of programs who responded to our survey indicated that they offer some type of targeted benefits. And so this looks pretty different across programs. And what we see most commonly, so about 25% of the programs that say, yes, I offer some type of targeted benefit, serve participants from low-income households. So this means that they're restricting eligibility to serve participants that are most in need. And so this could, for example, look like Oakland Promise's Brilliant Baby program, which restricts eligibility to families that are eligible for Medi-Cal, so a statewide means tested program. Other programs enroll everyone or have wider eligibility, but offer a savings match that's restricted to participants from low-income households. So about 38% of programs that offer targeted benefits do this type of restriction. So this could look like a savings match program at the state level, in which anyone can register or sign up for the program, but you only get a savings match if you fall below a certain income threshold. The third option here is providing additional deposits for participants who either come from low-income households or attend a school of predominantly students from low-income households. So this could look like offering a $50 deposit or an additional bonus for participants who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Or it could look like, in the latter half of this example here, offering a bonus for everyone who attends a particular school. So for example, in the last couple of years, San Francisco's Kindergarten to College has been piloting an equity incentive in which participants who are identified by the school district as attending a high need school receive an additional bonus or contribution into their accounts. And then finally, there's one program that offers an additional contribution for participants who are Black, Indigenous, Asian, or Latinx. And what we have seen, especially in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and a continued focus on racial equity, we continue to see an interest in thinking about what racial equity looks like in CSA programs. And so we expect to continue to see additional energy and interest in these type of targeted contributions in the future. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about what's not in the report. But before I do, I want to put in another plug to say that if you have questions about the data that we're sharing in this report, or questions for us at Prosperity Now about CSAs, please feel free to drop them in the chat now or at any time. And Shira Markov, my colleague, is manning the question and chat box, and will be sharing questions in a little bit with myself and Celeste, our guest speaker. So please feel free to ask questions at any time. And want to just share a couple of report limitations or what's missing from our State of the Field report that we would like to include, and would love to work with you as members of the field on ways to capture this type of data. So we've shared a lot of information about the number of kids that are being served by CSA programs, where there are programs, and what the program models look like. One thing or two things that are not shared in this report are demographic information about who is being served by CSA programs. So first, on race and ethnicity data, this is a question that we ask and have asked in previous years' surveys about the racial and ethnic makeup of CSA participants. It's a question that we're very interested in as a field and at Prosperity Now. And unfortunately, we know that race and ethnicity data, particularly for large opt-out programs, can be very challenging to access. And so what we see in our survey response data is that we only have data for about a third of participants across CSAs, across CSA programs, and it's not representative, so we don't feel confident in its proportionality or ability to map on to the field, and so we're not sharing it at this time, but it is something that we want to acknowledge as a limitation. And we would love to be able to share additional data about who's being served by CSA programs, but unfortunately, the data that we do have are not representative. The same story is true around household income data. So we have responses that cover about half of participants. And what we see is that on the household income data question, we have slightly better access. And when I say we, I mean programs have slightly better access to income proxies. So programs in the past have been able to share 55% of our school district qualifies for free or reduced price lunch, but are not able, they don't have access to income data at the household level. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that as a field and in our reporting that this is information that we would love to be able to share out. And definitely would encourage programs who have access to that type of data to be able to report it on their own. And if programs that are on, if there are folks on this webinar that are in planning mode, to really advocate for high quality disaggregated data access so we are better able to tell the story about who is being served by CSA programs. So just wanted to share that and also note that there are a lot of other findings in our State of the Field report that we don't have time to cover today. But if you're curious about additional information about what CSA programs look like, the type of program design decisions they make, are they opt-in, are they opt-out, what type of account do they use to hold their savings or their assets, all of that information and more can be found in our brief, which again is in the handout section. But I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get to our conversation with Celeste. And so I'm going to move us along to our discussion. And so I would like to reintroduce Celeste Rodriguez. And Celeste, if you're able to join us, awesome. Okay, great. I can see you, so that's promising. Hopefully others can see you as well. So I just want to say welcome to Celeste and wanted to know if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and Opportunity LA, if we want to start with that. And while you're talking, Olivia is going to drop in your program flyer link and some additional information about Opportunity LA if folks are curious.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Celeste Rodriguez, and as Erin mentioned earlier, I am the Senior Program Manager for our Community Wealth Initiatives over at the Los Angeles Community Investment for Families Department. My team's portfolio includes numerous financial empowerment initiatives like our Los Angeles Guaranteed Income Program, Big Leap, and of course, our Children's Savings Account Program, Opportunity LA. Opportunity LA is quite large, as was mentioned. We have the second largest school district in the LA region. And what we have created is an automatic enrollment program, which provides a free savings account with our financial partner, Citibank, with an initial $50 deposit for all Los Angeles Unified School District first graders. This program was created in partnership with the school district, the city, and the county, with the city acting as the program administrator. We launched as a pilot last year, spring 2021, for over 12,000 students at just under 200 of the district's highest needs schools. We utilized the Student Equity Needs Index to identify those schools And then this spring of 2022, we went to 100% of schools, which I will mention, the plan initially was to do this over 5 years, but we went from year 1 to year 2 and got to 100%, which is 519 schools with over 30,000 accounts open this year. So in total, our program has 44,600 accounts, and we plan to open 32,000 annually.
Thank you for sharing that. Before we move on to your other big initiative happening in your department, Big Leap, I'm wondering if you could just spend just a second sharing a little bit more detail about the Student Equity Needs Index. So as programs are thinking about, or folks are thinking about, how do I scale up my program? Could you just talk about the approach that you used and how you worked with the district and how you decided to use the Student Equity Needs Index, and just maybe share a little bit for folks that are unfamiliar?
I almost think, Erin, you can speak to this even better than me, because you have been on the journey with LA from the start, like 5 years ago. But really recognizing that this was going to be a phased-in program just because of the scale of Los Angeles, we knew we wanted to start with the highest need schools, which, because the Student Equity Needs Index pulls in so many data points like low income and just community factors, even like rates of like health disparities, we knew that that was a good source. But also the county had offered additional data points that changed the weights a little bit when it came to benefit access and people who were eligible for certain benefits that were low income. So we really wanted to account for as much of that as possible because we started, I mean, relatively small for us, right? At 10%, 12,000 students, we wanted this to be an equitable rollout. But as I said, then we jumped straight to 100% the next year, which we're really grateful we had the financial ability to do that. And we're still really happy that we started our soft launch with the highest need students.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Definitely a partnership between the city, the county, and the school district in determining this equitable rollout and making sure that you're building buy-in from stakeholders across elected officials and across community members. And it definitely was no small lift to decide on all of those schools before you jumped to scale. I'm wondering if you could give everyone a high-level overview of Big Leap, and then we can talk about the intersection between CSA programs and basic income.
Yes, happy to. So a Big Leap is serving 3,200 families in Los Angeles who are at or below the federal poverty level. We're providing $1,000 per month for 1 year. And at this point, it's another one of our programs that are currently the biggest in the country, and we're joining the Mayors for Guaranteed Income for this initiative. Of course, our mayor was part of Mayors for Guaranteed Income, and we've had a lot of, speaking of buy-in, right, from our political officials, this recognition that direct cash aid was really important, especially in our response to COVID. And so we're excited to be putting this forward. It's a demonstration project. So we have our research partner that's going to be pulling data about the positive, or, you know, we can't reflect what we think the outcomes will be, but learning from Stockton's project, we know that there are positive outcomes when it comes to health, mental health, and financial well-being. So we're really excited to learn more about the impact on Angelenos.
Awesome. We're really excited to hear about the results of the pilot as well. So we have a number of CSA programs across the country that are either directly integrating guaranteed income or working alongside some guaranteed income initiatives. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more theoretically about how guaranteed income and CSAs both fit under the community wealth initiatives bucket. So if you could just talk about the framing and how you talk about both of those programs in tandem as a city department.
Well, so the Community Investment for Families Department was just created in this fiscal year. We officially launched in the fall of last year, and it came from the recognition from all of our leadership that all of the impacts of COVID really just heightened problems that already existed. Like poverty is persistent in Los Angeles and has always been something that various entities have worked to address. But this is now a dedicated department to ensure that Angelenos most in need are getting connected to resources. And one of our prime objectives, our mission of our department, is to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty, recognizing that it is a generational challenge. And so as we know, right, barriers to social mobility, one of them is access to higher education. And so I think specifically with Opportunity LA, like we're not only giving people tools for savings and having them talk about this for the first time, like what does savings look like, but just even at the basics, building aspirations with this recognition that like if kids believe they can go to college and their families now have a mechanism for putting away for any future expenses, if they achieve post-secondary education, they can increase their income and really change their family circumstance long term. It's very much a two-generational approach with our department. And speaking of that two-generational approach, right, families can't focus on saving if they're barely surviving. And I think COVID made that very clear. That was one of our biggest challenges in our launch. The timing was spring 2021. Like we were still amidst the health and economic crisis and still trying to meet basic needs. And so to talk about savings accounts for kids, it was really, it wasn't good timing. Like we need to actually talk about stability for families first. And I think overall, that's what's so great about what's happening, I think, in the field, and even what's pointed out in the State of the Field report by Prosperity Now is the fact that direct cash aid and things like guaranteed income are giving people that ability to meet their basic needs that they can best address on their own, just with this, small compared to, right, like the price of food and the price of gas and the price of rent right now. But it can make such a huge impact to the stability of a family to be able to save for emergencies and for their children's future.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that framing. It's something that we are really interested in as an organization. And I will also share that some of our colleagues were working on a cash assistance program last year. And one of their biggest takeaways was that the cash assistance was extremely helpful, but families are so behind right now and are experiencing such acute financial insecurity that's being compounded by the financial insecurity that they walked into the pandemic with. And so the cash assistance was immediately useful, but families spent most of that money catching up on bills and thinking about paying down debt. And so it's really exciting for us to see this energy in the CSA field of thinking about how do we help families have the conversation about building for their future while connecting them to resources to get their needs met today. And so I'm curious if you could share anything about either Opportunity LA or Big Leap, anything that has jumped out at you since these programs have started. Is there anything that you've learned in your pilot phase of Big Leap and in your pilot phase of Opportunity LA for folks that are working on the ground that you'd like to share?
I think that, well, there's a couple things. We'll only do two with our limited time, but I think that one thing is, there were just like these inherent challenges to launching these programs during the time of COVID, and this need to ensure we could reach people digitally. So what's really elevated in both guaranteed income and children's savings account programs is that, I mean, we all know the digital divide exists. We know that our school district did its best to close that gap in order to do digital learning successfully. But the fact is, beyond giving people the technical, the computer and the hotspot, there's also just the literacy to ensure that they can access different sites and register their account online for guaranteed income and apply for guaranteed income. I mean, for CSAs, right, we have Citibank portal, so you would apply online and get an incentive for registering, or the application process for guaranteed income was also online. And so we really worked with our partners on the, trusted community agencies so that they can open up their doors and computer labs. But it continues to be a barrier and something that we're going to be focusing on overall as we're talking about how to eliminate poverty in LA. That's the digital divide is a gap, language barrier, right? We're translating our booklet into Arabic right now. We're trying to ensure that we're really meeting every where they are, recognizing that everyone's coming from a different place, and sometimes the people we want to reach the most who don't usually have access, it means we need to go that extra mile to get them connected. And lastly, financial coaching. The fact is, right now, we have an amazing network of nonprofits we work with to connect people to free tax prep and rental assistance and food resources. But financial coaching is inconsistent right now across them, and we really want to ensure that we're offering quality one-on-one financial coaching for free as a automatic service from the city so that people have the tools they need to make the most of this guaranteed income and to save for the future.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it fits right alongside your goals of one, that two-gen approach, and also thinking about how to serve families holistically. I have one more question for you, Celeste, and then I want to make sure we have time to get into our audience Q&A. So there's a lot of exciting policy and program developments in LA. There's a lot of exciting policy and program developments in California and across the country. We've seen a rollout of a lot of federal money going to state. So I was just curious if you wanted to share something that you're excited about in LA, something you're excited about in California, and then where you hope the field can go in the next, however you want to take this question. But yeah, the local, state, and national, I'd love to hear your take as a practitioner.
Well, in LA, and overall, right, I'm excited about these different mechanisms that the way we're being creative to reach families, like being forced to be creative, right? Got a lot of, like even like tech platforms and text messaging, I feel like has been increased for our team. Just again, meeting people where they are and being creative with how we do that. And taking some of these in the future, even when we're able to meet in person, like recognizing that some of these things like webinars actually just helps reduce barriers to access for families that need, childcare or transportation. As I mentioned, who we're serving with the school district is 80% low income. And so the fact that as a new department, we can step in and administer this program and be a hub of resources for that food access, rental assistance access is really important and exciting for us to be able to actually wrap our arms around families. I think overall in California, we're just so, we want everyone, like the California Coalition of CSAs, like everyone should have access to children's savings accounts. And so the fact that the state is stepping in to provide that is incredibly exciting. And I think that having the coalition of our programs in the state be able to help guide the state and kind of learning from us the problems that we face, the creative things we've come up with. And for us, right, going to scale is going to be incredibly challenging for them. And so I'm really excited for the opportunity to hopefully collaborate so that everyone who has access to this resource knows about it, right, and can gain all of the benefits that we all intend them to have. And as a field, I think everything you all recognize in the state of the support, just that, families have needs. And I think without saying it, you guys say it, this is a two-generational approach. And if we're talking now about tying in cash aid, we're stabilizing families so that they have the opportunity to participate in these amazing programs.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Celeste. And I agree. That's what excites me the most, that we've had CSA programs around for a long time doing really, really strong community-based work. And it makes me so excited to think about the number of families who could begin to take full advantage of those types of programs if they have better access to be able to meet their kids' needs today. I'm sure what you are hearing from families is similar to what we have heard in our previous survey work and when we go to CSA gatherings across the country, is that CSAs offer such an exciting opportunity at hope. And families are still limited by exactly what's in their wallet. And so I'm really excited to see that the field is embracing these big, bold ideas around helping families achieve financial stability so that they can begin investing in their child's future and really take advantage of all those opportunities instead of feeling like they're having to spend all of their cash available just to get back to zero, which is where most families are in this country. And so it's really exciting to me to see this type of integration. So I want to move us along to Q&A, but I just want to put a reminder to all the attendees in the chat. If you have questions for Celeste, for myself, I mean, Celeste is such a wealth of knowledge, and her team has stood up 2 giant programs at scale in a very short amount of time during COVID, with a lot of new team members and a lot of things going on at the city and state level. So if you have programmatic or policy questions for Celeste, please take advantage of this opportunity to have a rock star answer some questions. But I'm going to turn it over to Shira to start fielding some questions. But if you have more, please drop them in the chat.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Shira Markoff. I'm a policy fellow at Prosperity Now. So the first question that I have, and maybe we'll start with Celeste on this question, I'll sort of talk specifically from the LA point of view, and then Erin can talk more generally. But the question is about how have CSA practitioners overcome challenges with collecting student data from an implementing school district for enrollment? And then kind of how has that motivated the use of it, or has that motivated the use of an opt-out program in some cases?
So our program, Opportunity LA, is automatic enrollment, so it's opt-out. I truly believe just our scale, that's the only way we could have done it. And it was also just really important from the beginning to ensure we could reduce all barriers to access. It took us like 5 years to make a memorandum of agreement between the school district, the county, and the city. So it was a tremendous lift. And we actually ended up still having trouble with data sharing between last year's like soft launch and this year. The delay in actually getting data from LAUSD because of the COVID impacts and their shift in focus actually helped us identify a challenge with getting the names and information to open accounts for students identified as unhoused or unstably housed. They were simply like not including them in the list. And again, right, this is about, we want this to be equitable and we want these families to break their cycles of generational poverty, and not having them even learn about this program was a really big issue. And so again, it made us be creative and shift gears and talk to the district about creating a small, almost like opt-in piece of our program, because we couldn't communicate with them directly. They couldn't disclose their contact information, but we could work with the office that works with these students and families to do additional trainings, let them know what this is, do communication through them so that families can learn about it. And we actually added a targeted benefit so that they would get $75 instead of $50 in their account automatically when they opted in.
Could I ask one follow-up question on that? How did you discover that students were being excluded if they didn't have a permanent address? That's super interesting.
It was a numbers issue. Like when we got an agreement that even though enrollment was delayed and there was a lot of enrollment shifts because of vaccine requirements with LAUSD, when we got the initial list that wasn't cleaned yet with people who opted out, we just made an agreement, right? We would wait and ensure we weren't, putting people in the program who didn't want to be, but because of our timeline, there was a discrepancy in the amount of students. I think over 400 had been left out previously, and so it's a weird, helpful thing that had happened because we discovered it. Because to them, I think they just protect data and don't need to explain that to anyone. But for us, we were missing a really important population that we wanted to ensure are connected to the program.
Great. So another question is for Erin, which is really about, you talked about how the racial and income demographic information for participants is hard to collect. Can you talk about some of the ways that programs have tried to at least approximate some of this information if they don't collect it individually?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in our data, what we tend to see is that smaller opt-in programs generally have better access to demographic data, and it's because they are walking through an enrollment or intake process themselves, and so they have the ability to ask those questions directly. Unfortunately, that is it's a much smaller percentage of programs and kids that are enrolled in a program like that. And so what we have seen other programs have success is to work with proxy data. So for example, some programs that partner with a school district are able to share, for example, the percentage of students across the district that qualify for free or reduced price lunch. For example, as Celeste shared earlier, about 80% of LAUSD students qualify for free and reduced lunch or are in one or more categories of high need, including low income, English language learners, homeless or youth in foster care. So some CSA programs are able to partner with those school districts to provide those proxies, and other programs that work at birth or do enrollment at birth have worked with their state Bureau of Vital Records or hospital records to be able to get a proxy for that data. The challenge for automatic enrollment program is data privacy and protection, exactly what Celeste said. So there's a tension between trying to make sure families are being served by the program and the entity that holds this data not wanting to part with it, which there's understandable privacy and security concerns. So usually what programs get are proxies or aggregate data rather than saying Erin Thiemann is XYZ and her household income is XYZ, which is can be challenging for some programs who really want to get a sense of who's being served by their program. Yeah, Celeste, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add on that question as well.
No, I mean, it's just a challenge. We also don't get the specific data because it's not something that they can share with us. They offer, right, the schools there might be the more higher level aggregate for certain areas of the region, but we can't get specific like first grader demographic that are in our program.
Great. So, Celeste, since we do have a lot of people who indicated in our poll that they're new to this field, I wonder, having just launched a program, what would you sort of suggest for people, for organizations that are interested in starting a CSA program? What's sort of the best advice of how they get started with this?
We have the benefit in California that there's already like a coalition of programs, and I think talking to existing programs at any phase of development is just so helpful and insightful for learning. I found that, so if the coalition exists in your area, amazing, tap into it. If it doesn't, maybe create it, invite people to have a discussion about the different phases of developing a program. Things as simple as templates or model incentives that have been built into other programs are so incredibly helpful, so that no one needs to start from scratch, right? There's over 120 programs in existence, and we all can learn so much from each other. And everyone I have met has been so open to sharing kind of the pitfalls to avoid and ways to make things better. And it's been really incredible. I'll give a special shout out to San Francisco's K2C program because they have definitely been just one of the most important resources for us as we navigated developing this program.
And just for context for those who are, oh, sorry, Shira, I was just going to share, if you're joining this webinar and you're not connected to a regional CSA coalition, there is the California coalition that Celeste has mentioned. There is a Midwest CSA coalition and a Northeast CSA coalition, which used to be New England, but has expanded so much it now covers a broad swath of the Northeast. And Shira's dropping into the chat our CSA starter kit, which has lots of the templates and sample materials that Celeste was referring to. Celeste, I have one question for you as someone who's just gone through this programmatic development process. So one of the questions that we often get from folks who are interested in launching a program is, how did you get it funded? And I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the unique opportunities that you've had as being a program in California, but sort of how your budget gets cobbled together across your different sources as a public entity.
Yes, we're funded by the city, the county, and the state. I think what was really key to us launching last year was that the California Student Aid Commission, CSAC, had offered grant opportunities for people either expanding or creating programs. And so we were successful in that. And that helped us have, when you ask someone for money, they want to know where you're getting money from as well. And so the ability to showcase that we had a grant and that the city could step in and offer funds specifically for city residents because of limitations of where they can spend funds. And then the county could contribute to support covering students that were outside of our jurisdiction. that is what made the first year and us going to 100% this year possible. We actually, interestingly, we had a reallocation of LAPD funds that helped, that specifically was earmarked to help Black and Brown communities. And that is what supported us in getting a little over $1 million so that we could go to full scale this year. And so again, right, that recognition of priorities and addressing poverty and pulling resources for that, the establishment of our department. And so the hope is that we're able to continue next year with this blended funding. Unfortunately, so far, the state has not announced that they'll be continuing these grant opportunities. And during the planning process over the past 5 years, we really anticipated that the state could be a continuous funding source. So now we're working with our coalition to figure out how we're aligning with the state. Again, all with the same intentions of supporting families and accessing savings accounts, but still working through kind of the financial mechanics of that. And honestly, we'll be turning to philanthropy in this next year, and we will take any lessons learned from anyone on the call who's already ventured into that space and are really happy to share everything we go through with anyone who has questions as we start to find ways to blend resources.
Great. So one last question for you both is, so I know, Celeste, you talked a little bit about kind of the impact of COVID on the program, but I'm wondering about kind of, as well as changes that you've seen, or both of you have seen in the field, and kind of what do you think is sort of here to stay about some of the changes that programs have made during COVID?
I think and hope this focus on families is here to stay as we continue to talk about ways to build savings and kids' aspirations, just ensuring that their whole family is supported as we move forward with that.
I think one thing from our survey data that programs are hoping is here to stay is more options for engaging with a program. So we've seen a lot of programs move to virtual financial coaching, for example. And what they heard from their parents is that even though, you know, a virtual environment just like now is never going to be as compelling or engaging as in person, what it does offer is additional flexibility for families. So one program shared that switching to financial coaching, they've actually had an increase in the number of participants because for working parents, they don't have to worry about transportation, they don't have to worry about finding a sitter or childcare, and they can also, you know, be listening to this webinar, ask their questions, and throw in a load of laundry or take care of other things that are happening in the household, including caring for older parents. So I think some of those virtual engagement opportunities will be here to stay because of that flexibility.
Great, thank you both. I'll turn it back to you, Erin, to wrap up.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Celeste, for joining us today. It was great to hear about some really exciting initiatives in LA, and we will absolutely stay tuned as you guys publish results and learn more from both your Guaranteed Income Pilot and Opportunity LA, your CSA program. So thanks, Celeste, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're just going to move into some next steps as we close out today. After this webinar ends, you will get a survey asking for your feedback and suggestions. And also on this slide, and as Shira has dropped into the chat, we have a lot of resources related to children's savings account programs on our website. The link that she dropped in there from the CSA Starter Kit is a great place to start. I would also be remiss if I did not ask you all to join the Campaign for Every Kid's Future. This is our network where we're focused on child wealth building. So for all things CSAs and all things baby bonds, definitely sign up to join the campaign. You'll receive a newsletter and information about developments in the child wealth building space. And the last link on here is to attend our upcoming webinars at Prosperity Now. And we will share the slides and share the recording with you so you can click on those links, but they're all available on our Prosperity Now website. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at future child wealth building related events, including our upcoming in-person summit in September. But with that, we'll sign off, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and thank you for joining us.